Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Sherry, and I'm here tonight to welcome you all to our reading with Jennie Kew as part of a romantic rendezvous locked down. Jennie, hello to you, and thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you this evening?
Yeah, very well, thank you. So before I fade into the background and leave Jennie to read to us, a little bit about Jennie for you. Jennie writes contemporary slice-of-life erotic romance novels and contemporary and paranormal short erotic stories. Her books include the Bennett's Bastard series and the Kew collection. While not sitting in front of her computer, Jennie can be found reading a book, watching a movie, or building Lego. She lives in regional New South Wales, a stone's throw from Australia's capital, Canberra, with her husband's magnificent beard, a teenage giant, and their feline overlord and editor-in-chief, Tallulah. Don't forget that you can connect with Jennie at jenniekew.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and her Amazon author page. Jennie, I'm going to fade away and leave you to it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This is my first ever Zoom thing. My son actually had to teach me how to set it up. That would be the teenage giant. I'm going to read to you from His Own Heaven. I'm going to read you chapter 2. His Own Heaven is the third book in my Bennett's Bastard series. It came out at the end of February this year. It's a seasoned romance, so both the hero and heroine are 40 years old. I tend to write my characters to be a little bit older. They're all sort of 30 plus, because I'm in my 40s myself, and honestly, reading about teenagers, you get enough of that. So I like to read these ones. I like to write these ones, and I hope you enjoy what I have written. But I'm going to read you chapter 2, which is the introduction of Lucy into our story. Okay. Chapter 2. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. Do not freak out. Lucy repeated the words over and over in her head as she tried and failed to ignore the enormous man standing at the rear of the local Friday night meat market. Her new boss. Her new, so fucking fuckable it should be illegal boss. Oh, how she wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole, because mortified didn't even begin to describe how she was feeling at that particular moment in time. Dressed in her tightest jeans, her favourite blouse, and the sluttiest shoes she owned, she'd gone out with only one purpose in mind: get laid. It had been ages since she'd been to a speed dating night, and the only reason she was even there was because of him. He of the ridiculously tall and insanely hot Tobias Bennett. She hadn't stopped fantasizing about the man since she'd walked out of his office Monday afternoon, and masturbating just wasn't getting the job done. She needed dick, preferably one attached to a man who knew how to use it, was willing to overlook her own physical shortcomings, and whom she'd never have to see again after a night of wham bam thank you ma'am. That had been the goal, and that goal was quickly circling the drain. She couldn't possibly go ahead with it now Tobias had seen her. What would happen if they ended up on the same table together, on a date? Hell, it would be just her luck he'd turn out to be some kind of antiquated prude who thought only loose women turned up to these events. And while it was perfectly fine for him, a man, to be there, good little girls like her should be at home, tucked up in bed with a book or knitting or something. She almost laughed out loud. A good little girl. Firstly, she was 40 years old, so hardly a girl. And secondly, no one had ever accused her of being either good or little. Nope. When it came to describing Lucy Barton, those terms were right up there with subtle, meek, and whatever the fuck the opposite of sarcastic was. She'd been told more than once her mouth would get her in trouble one day, and when one day had come, it had seen her out of a job. Okay, so it wasn't the only thing that had gotten her fired, but it hadn't helped. Then again, you'd think a decade spent working for the one company, weathering all sorts of changes in that time, from operating systems to managing directors, would earn her a modicum of loyalty. But no, because when it came down to gaining a new client worth $1 squillion or retaining an employee worth considerably less than that, her mouth had tipped the scales in the client's favour, even if he'd been the one in the wrong. She clenched her jaw and shoved the thoughts away. Now was not the time to dwell on the past. Pretending to casually glance around the pub, Lucy tried simultaneously judging the distance to the nearest exit, calculating the fastest escape route to said exit, and getting in one more peek at the deliciousness that was Tobias Bennett. If she timed it right, she could slip out through the crowd before the speed dating actually began and avoid any further embarrassment in front of her new boss. Should have worn my cherry docks, she muttered, staring down at her hot rod red patent leather stilettos, ironically the most impractical of all her shoes for making a fast getaway. "All right, gentlemen," the lady running the speed dating said, "if you could move to a table and take a seat, and ladies, good luck." Everyone moved at once. Instead of sneaking out as intended, Lucy somehow got dragged farther in, carried away on the scene of hormonally driven singles as they sought their next conquest. And that's when it happened. As Lucy attempted to escape her fate, she was shoved from behind and stumbled into a kid in his 20s, who instantly recoiled from her. "Whoa, they're ugly," he said, exaggerating his show of horror. "A little early for Halloween, isn't it? What are you supposed to be anyway, a zombie hooker?" The guy standing next to him pretended to cough to hide his laughter. He wore a t-shirt that read, "Bearded for her pleasure," the words fashioned in the shape of a thick mountain man-style beard. She assumed he wore it as a joke, as he had no beard to speak of. Two girls who looked barely old enough to drink stood behind them, giggling into their vodka cruisers. Instead of telling them off, Lucy bit her tongue and offered the little shits her very best resting bitch face, because the last thing she wanted when she was trying to make a run for it was to draw even more attention to her situation by causing a scene. But before she could turn and walk away, a large hand rested on her shoulder. "Apologize to the lady." Tobias Bennett's deep voice vibrated through her, setting every one of her nerve endings on fire and making her body tingle with awareness in all the best places. Oh, holy crap. So much for the fast getaway. Now. Another hand, accompanied by an equally deep voice, landed on her other shoulder. Glancing up at her boss, she watched the muscles tick in his jaw as he glared at the arsehole who'd made fun of her. A quick look at his friend, and she came face to face with a pair of crystalline blue eyes almost identical to Tobias's, and an easy smile stretched across his impossibly handsome face. "Evening, beautiful," he said with a wink. "Beautiful?" Lucy did a double take, and the jerk-off 20-something snorted. She bristled at the dismissive sound and gritted her teeth, tamping down the urge to say something and make the situation worse. But it seemed Tobias had no such reluctance. He stepped forwards and folded his thick arms across his impressive chest, causing the dark blue cotton of his button-up shirt to pull tight around his biceps. The big man's less than subtle power move made her insides clench with need, and Lucy suppressed a whimper as she wondered what it would feel like to be held in those strong arms. "I said apologize to the lady," Toby growled again, glaring down at them like they were shit on the sole of his shoe. "Now." The jerk's friend paled, as if he'd only just realized exactly how huge her rescuer was. To be fair, the man made Lucy feel small, and she stood at just a smidge under 6 feet tall, even when she wasn't wearing 5-inch high follow me home and fuck me shoes. The jerk scoffed again, as if the whole situation was so beneath him, then rolled his eyes. "I'm sorry, okay, it was a joke. Jesus." Then he shook his head and muttered under his breath, "Bitch." Lucy sighed. "Wow, okay. You know what? I was prepared to let it slide, but you just couldn't help yourself, could you?" She leaned closer, invaded the ignorant little twat's personal space, and turned her scars towards him. "Take a good look, Junior," she said quietly, smiling grimly as the jerk visibly stiffened. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was a firefighter. I'm ugly, as you put it, because I put my life on the line to save a 4-year-old kid from a burning house. But I'm guessing from your expensive-looking haircut and clothes and, what, the Mercedes in the car park? The jerk nodded and swallowed hard. That you've never sacrificed anything for anyone in your life. But sure, you go ahead and call me names if it makes you feel like a big man. She let her gaze travel deliberately, disdainfully up and down the arrogant brat. You in your skinny jeans and ironic t-shirts, playing at grown-ups in daddy's car as you bang impressionable schoolgirls you have zero intention of calling after you shove them in the back of the taxi you so very predictably have on speed dial. You sad little boy. So yeah, I just may be the ugliest bitch you'll ever meet, but at least I'm only ugly on the outside. Face flushed with what she hoped was embarrassment, and maybe a little fear, and eyes darting to the side, the jerk stammered, I'm sorry. Only this time it was said with a modicum of contrition. Get out of my face, Lucy growled, then sighed softly as the jerk and his friend scurried away to join the dating pool. The lady in charge caught her eye, pressed her lips into a thin line and shook her head. Lucy had been there often enough to know what that meant. Good old rule number 3. Harassment of any kind will not be tolerated. Except what they really meant was harassment of any kind towards people we deem socially acceptable will not be tolerated. Freak show rejects need not apply. Which explained why Skinny Jeans McGee wasn't receiving the same glare of disapproval currently pointed at her. He may have been an asshole, but at least he was a good-looking asshole. Lucy nodded towards the door. I'll just go. Do, please, and take your friends with you. Lucy frowned. Friends? Behind her, someone cleared their throat, a hint of amusement enriching the deep timbre. She stiffened. Somehow, while she was ranting at the jerk, she'd forgotten Tobias and his friend were still standing there like 2 enormous sentinels, watching over her even as she'd made a fool of herself in front of her new employer. Hands clenched into fists to hide her anxiety, she pasted on a smile and slowly turned to face them. So, am I fired? She asked, only half joking. Perfectly carved eyebrows arched over fathomless blue eyes, and the sexiest grin she'd ever seen on a man tugged at the corners of his full lips. No. He turned to his friend, and they seemed to talk to each other without actually saying anything at all, just a few raised eyebrows and nods in her direction. Then they bumped their fists together and the whole world turned upside down as Lucy found herself being tossed over Tobias Bennett's shoulder and carried out of the pub. What the hell? One strong arm banded around her legs, holding her in place so she couldn't kick, or perhaps fall from an extreme height, while his other hand landed on her ass. Smack! Lucy gasped at the sharp sting, then rubbed her thighs together and moaned as a glorious ache began to throb between her legs. Fuck! She could use some more of that. A moment later, she was standing upright again, Tobias gripping her hips like a vice, preventing her from toppling over when her heels wobbled on the gravel surface of the car park. She grabbed his arms to steady herself, and oh wow, his biceps were even thicker than she'd thought. Harder too. She gently squeezed them, but it was like fingering steel. Are you all right? He said, keeping his voice low. The single lamp in the car park shone with a dull yellow light, illuminating him from behind and casting his face in shadow. It made the already fearsome man look downright terrifying, like a huge spectre looming over her. But Lucy found she wasn't afraid. She was intrigued, and more than a little turned on. She licked her lips and nodded as she got her bearings. It's nothing I haven't heard before, she said, shrugging. Then, because she'd rather not kill the mood by throwing a pity party for one, she added, Where's your friend? Right here, beautiful. A shuffling of gravel drew her attention to the man rounding the back of the black truck parked beside them. And may I just say, that was fucking awesome. A true pleasure to watch. Entitled little shit didn't know what hit him. Tobias reached into his pocket and tossed a set of car keys at his friend. Lucy Barton, meet my brother, Charlie Bennett. Charlie bowed slightly, then looked up at her from under dark lashes as that same grin from earlier played across his face. His older, wiser, better-looking twin brother, he said, winking. Taking her hand in his, he pressed his lips to the backs of her fingers, right between her index and middle digits. The gesture wasn't lost on her, and her pussy clenched in response. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lucy Barton. His voice was a rich purr of masculine confidence. Wide-eyed but amused by his audacity, Lucy rolled her lips between her teeth as she repressed the laughter clawing its way up her throat. Turning to Tobias, she said, "Is he always like this?" Casting a long-suffering look at his brother, he sighed. "Sadly, yes." When she laughed out loud, he looked down at her, a half-smile curving his delectable mouth. He lifted his hand and stroked the blade of one big finger over her scarred cheek. Lucy shivered, and it had nothing to do with the cool sea breeze blowing in from the bay. He stepped closer and backed her up against the cab of the truck. "I've wondered all week what your smile would look like." "Have you?" she said, another shiver skittering through her. Lucy couldn't remember the last time someone said they'd been thinking about her, because most people tried not thinking about her. In fact, she was fairly certain her parents had tried so hard not to think about her, they'd completely forgotten she existed at all. But before she could let that little joy thief of a memory steal her mojo, she did what she dreamed of doing all week long and slid her hands over his chest, felt the ridges of hard muscle under his shirt twitch and flex. Jesus, is he this hard everywhere? Suddenly breathless, she whispered, "Tell me, Tobias, what else have you wondered about?" "Call me Toby," he said, the other half of his smile curling upwards, completing his sensual smile. "And I'd rather show than tell." "Show me then." "Come home with us, and I will." And that is the end of chapter 2. So once again, that was His Own Heaven, book 3 in my Bennett's Bachelor series.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jenny. That was great. I loved
Thank
it.
you.
I'm rushing out to buy that now because I want to know what happens next.
Excellent.
All right. To our viewers, I know you'll be really happy to have heard that from Jenny and got a little bit of a flavour of some of the great books that Jenny writes, and hopefully you'll all rush out and buy them starting at number 1 rather than number 3. So, Jenny, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you enjoyed the story, and yep, there's plenty more to come.
We did indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.